Hey, hello, hi. We're playing some League of Legends.
That was not an original. That was a song by Nikki
Whoa.
called Odds. Nikki is an Indonesian
No, no,
singer.
no, 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 no.
And
Stop.
gosh, thank you.
God damn it. Fucking League client is so goddamn fucky. Just trying to change the fucking volume. Whoops.
Welcome to the Howling Abyss. Take this. Hit the trail, friends. We got us a fight to win. Minions have spawned. First blood.
Stole my fucking penta!
Stick closer to the devil you know. Killing spree. Rampage. Double kill. Can't shoot your way to salvation, but I still try. The things I kill deserve what they give.
Ah, that's a good snag. That's annoying. What's up, Adinator?
Different day, different dust up.
Just big chilling in bed. Me too. I'm chilling. We're chilling tonight. It was a long day at work. All the fucking brat kids are coming back tomorrow. No more peace.
Ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
I am opposed to weaponized. No rest for wicked hearts.
Dang it! We're chilling. I'm hungry.
Shut down. Enemy double kill.
Ranch. Cool Ranch Doritos.
Your turret has been destroyed.
Frontier's whatever you want it to be.
An ally has been slain.
Death don't move when it used to.
She jumped on me.
Shut down. Double kill. Enemy triple kill. Shut down.
True. They're knockoff Doritos, though. They're not as good. Still good, though. Damn.
I've stared in the faces of life and death. Both.
Your team has destroyed an inhibitor.
Ain't no law out on the trail.
Oof.
There we go.
Maybe that is why you haven't responded to me this entire time.
Yeah, I was just about to say we might have been able to get you to live on that last little bar if we were just honestly been.
My bad.
Yeah, it's okay. I also didn't ult on. I could have swore I ulted and then threw my W, but I guess I didn't because I was like, if I was ulted, I bet I would have killed him like one shot sooner, which would have saved you. Hey, bro. Oh.
Hello?
Howdy.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good.
Oh, you guys are in my wait.
We're
y-
playing League.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I let me invite you to this Discord. I have two others.
Oh, we could have a 5-stack? Question mark. Are they playing League with us?
We're playing League.
Yeah, playing League.
You don't want to play League, you're playing Overwatch?
Oh.
Oh. Okay. Well, hold on. We're figuring this out. So, yes. Okay, yes. I guess.
Are you
They had the
Trevor or Tucker?
Trent. My name is Trent.
Trent. Sorry, I knew it was something like that. Trent. Tell him to get his shit together, or he has a tiny penis.
Okay, well, I'm gonna invite you to this Discord server,
Okay.
and you should join.
Don't know how I feel about joining that Discord. Fruity Pebbles. I don't know what we're hell yeahing about, Addy, but hell yeah. Oh yeah, Minecraft music? Yeah. Minecraft music is awesome. We love Minecraft music. I'm not waiting for somebody to get out of NARAM that I don't even know. Ping isn't the best, but send it.
Match found.
Hey team, do you guys want to play some Dead by Daylight since you're both up?
You have good taste, my friend.
Spike rush.
That's my double. I'm out of here.
All set up. Teleport's ready. A gift. That's a good spot.
God, I'm pissed.
One enemy remaining.
Ah! Of course you would ult.
Spike planted.
Cutting their vision. Cutting their vision. Reload. Reloading. The symphony of death. Don't worry, you get used to it.
Teleport's ready. That works. A gift.
One enemy remaining.
Sorry, we could not work out our differences.
How's it going? Going good, Bunty. How you doing? I'm eating a bowl of cereal.
Last round before the switch.
Go, go, go. Fight till the end.
Fruity Pebbles is so bomb.
They are so dead.
Get out of my way.
a good spot.
Spike planted. Last player standing.
Wow.
Who's next?
Oops.
Oh, shut up, Bonzi. You're funny. You're a funny guy.
Fire in the hole!
Switching
Second,
sides.
Zenfire, let's not complicate it.
Freaking Bonzi, always coming in here with the compliments. Yeah, I'm down to play some Dead by Daylight.
This should be. Teleport's ready. That works.
Here.
A gift.
Enemy spotted B. Eliminate. Reloading.
There they are.
Last player standing.
What was I doing? I don't know why I right-clicked. Oops.
We got this.
True, I don't know how Bonzi isn't already married with like 10 kids.
Find a way through them.
His charm, 10 out of 10. Would recommend.
All set up.
Get out of my way. Take this.
Teleport's ready.
My ult's ready.
I will again.
There was another one up top. Oh god.
Gotta go.
Really?
Out of charges.
Last player standing.
Here we go. Shock it.
Match point.
Gotta go.
Your hearts are pounding.
Who will I spot first? Teleport's ready. Who's next? That's a good start. That works. Trap destroyed.
.30 seconds left. One enemy enemy
Not
remaining.
your best. I would apologize to them, but
Sudden death.
this should do. In we go. Teleport's ready. Again.
Oh my god.
Get out of my way!
Last player standing. Defenders win.
Let me play another Spike Rush or two, and then we'll play some DBD.
Match found. Spike rush.
Okay, fam. If any of you die, I'll be vexed. So just keep alive, yeah?
Fuck! Fuck, fuck! Fuck, fuck! Fuckity, fuck, fuck! Fuckity bam, this game sucks, bum bum. Fuck this game, bum bum. This game is shit, bum bum bum.
My eyes are down. 30 seconds left. Last player
Like that
standing.
type of shit.
Come on! Get me in the line of fire. Focus now. Eyes off me. This should be.
Now, what's this?
Teleport's ready. Someone see? Let's go!
One enemy remaining.
That's a good spot.
Lock in sight.
Last round in the half.
Finally, this is how I like to win.
Reloaded. Knock him down. Reload him.
Get out of my way!
Stick. Reload him. Someone missed.
Reloading.
Watch your eyes. That works. Blinding. All set up. Flash out. Teleport's ready. Too late.
Planted.
A gift.
Last player standing.
There they are.
Didn't realize you got a half. That sucks.
Switching sides.
Which gun to pick this time? Reload him. Teleport's ready. I got enemies, eh? That's a good start.
One enemy remaining.
Booyah!
Tell me what you have learned, Cypher. Oh, sorry. I meant us. Please tell us. This should do. Teleport's ready. That works. A gift. I have them.
Get out of my way!
I don't think so.
Fire
There
in
they
the
are.
hole!
Last player standing. Spike planted.
Try. Dude, looks to me nothing to you, Bonzies. Is that
Match
what's up?
point.
New fight, new tactics, keep it fresh, yeah?
I'm just kidding. Looks shouldn't mean anything to anybody. To an extent.
They are so dead. All set up. Teleport's ready. too far.
Someone's mid.
Oh, I like it.
Oh, I should have peeked. I didn't
Last player standing.
realize I was gonna get flashed.
Spike planted. Attackers win.
Wait, should put that right there. I'm gonna put that right there. All right, last one.
Match found.
Match found. Yeah. Is the match found?
Spike rush.
Sky, ever thought about making other summons? Like, lions? Or,
Dragons. Tried once. It was not pretty.
Perfect. Teleport's ready. That's a good spot. There they are.
my ult's ready. Seek them.
Bing, bing, bong, bing, bing, bong, bing.
Spike planted.
Hawk out! Blinded. Here. Hawk out! Blinded.
One enemy remaining.
Healing over here. Watch out for breach's impact. It's hard to move after that.
Focus now. Eyes off me.
Enemy spotted B. Hawk out.
All set up.
Fire in the hole!
A gift.
Get out of my way!
Last player standing. 30 seconds left. Spike planted.
Poison orb emitting.
Last round before the switch.
They're nothing but flies.
They are so dead. Let's dance. Who's next?
One dead. My ult's ready. Enemy spotted B. Enemy spotted. Enemy spotted mid.
Oh, I like it.
Hawk out. Enemy spotted mid.
One enemy remaining.
My ult's ready.
Seek them out.
30 seconds left.
Found one.
Let you die.
Let's go, baby. That was clean.
Bigger picture.
Satchel up.
Switching
Clean
sides.
AF,
Just,
baby.
you know, from the front.
This should do. Teleport's ready.
Find the weak point. Break it.
That works. That's a good spot.
Here.
That's unfortunate, man.
Hawk out. Blinded. Ooh.
Last player standing. "30 seconds left.
I'm amped. Let's go. I got things to do.
Teleport's ready.
Hi.
A gift. That works.
Time to hunt.
Did not mean to do that. Ooh, hiccups.
Hawk out. One down. Hawk out.
Last player standing.
Oh my god.
Match point.
Alright.
Sit down. We're not done yet.
Are you guys ready to play some Dead by Daylight?
That race sucks. Time to hunt. Fire in the hole! They're concussed. Satchel up. Seek them out. Found one.
Last player standing. Defenders win.
Who's next?
Almost. Alright. I can play another Spike Rush or whatevs. Ooh, play some Halo Infinite or what about Phasmophobia? You guys should get Phasmophobia. That'd be cool. Whoa. Damn ads.
About 8 years ago, my family and I took a trip down to Tombstone, Arizona, one of the more famous ghost towns in that area of the US. I was quite a bit into the paranormal at the time, so naturally was more than excited to stop by the Haunted Birdcage Theatre. No, I didn't see anything at the time while taking the photos. However, about 5 minutes after taking that photo, my brother started freaking out about seeing a figure in the same area. It's neat that after looking through the photos, we had something to back his experience up. My favorite thing about the photos is that this isn't just some random black blob. This is an actual female figure. Even with the image quality being what it is, you can still zoom in and make out a surprising amount of detail. A necklace is easily visible. You can also make out bare shoulders and where the dress starts. Details of the face are harder to make out, but I almost want to say it looks like she's wearing a bird mask. The other photos pretty much debunk most possibilities of this being camera trickery, especially when you look at the side-by-side comparison. But hey, if anyone can come up with a reasonable non-paranormal explanation for this photo, I'd love to hear it. Needless to say, I've been pretty convinced of the paranormal ever since. I grew up in the South. Tons and tons of beautiful places to see that haven't been taken over by concrete yet. It's nice, but along with that, it's pretty boring. Being a teenager and wanting to go out and have fun led to mostly improvising with your buddies and hoping something good would come out of the night. There wasn't really a local spot to go hang out, like a club or a cool bar, and the places that were closest to this were boring, because you did them so many times. I'm sure if you've ever lived in a rural area, you can understand that feeling completely. Something that I found a ton of enjoyment in as a teenager was cruising around super late at night listening to music. I would fill my gas tank up, grab something to drink, a cigarrillo, and I would just take off driving around until the sun came up. It was a way for me to just clear my mind.
We're just playing a warm-up match.
Those country back roads were always fun to drive down at 2 a.m. and was also just the right amount of spooky. Well, one night, I absolutely got more than what I bargained for. I can't remember which month it was in exactly, but I knew for a fact that it was in the summertime, because I was out of school and also remember it being a comfortable, chill night. So, if I had to guess, it must have been around July. I was cruising around like I always did, and was completely worry-free. I had music blaring, and I was in my zone. I decided to head down to a park just out of boredom. This particular park is at the very end of a long stretch of desolate country road, but it was a really pretty drive because of that. When I say desolate country road, I don't mean that it's some dirt road that goes through the woods or anything crazy like that. It's a normal paved road, but there is really nothing on it after a certain point.
Popping on DVD Sweet.
The entire road takes about 20 minutes to drive down to get to the park, and after about 10 minutes into the drive, the houses start to get spread out further and further, to becoming no houses, and just roads leading into the park. I think a lot of the reason I liked this drive at night, it's because of how creepy it was, and I looked at it as some sort of adventure or whatever. The park isn't open for camping or anything. It's mostly just a lot of land with walking trails and biking trails set up through miles of woods. So obviously at around 3 a.m. in the morning, it's pretty dead. I made it there, and just did a slow and normal little loop around the park. The night before, it stormed very badly. So badly, in fact, I remember my parents and I had to take shelter because of the threat of a tornado touchdown. There ended up being no tornado, but the storms were pretty damn rough. Because of this, I came up on a fallen tree in the road that looped around to the exit of the park. That must have happened because of the storm. It wasn't some massive tree or something, but I knew for a fact that there was no way I could have gotten over it in my car, obviously. It was pitch black everywhere besides the front of my car because of my headlights, and just because of that, I immediately ruled out backing up the entire way. I just drove where I entered the park. I knew that was super dangerous, and there was no way. At this spot on the road, there was flat land on each side of me. I figured that would make most sense to just back up in the grass beside me, just a little, and then drive back the way I came. It was a long, one-way loop around the park, but I wasn't really worried about going out the wrong way since it was so late. So I started to back up off the road so that I could get my car turned around. All was good until I went to pull back up onto the road. I totally didn't take into account how wet the grass was and the amount of mud. My car went absolutely nowhere. My back tires were completely stuck and was spinning in place as I was trying to floor the gas pedal.
Fucking kidding me, right?
I started to become pretty scared at this point. Not the most ideal situation to be in. I immediately take my cell phone out my pocket and saw that I had service, which was a huge relief. I called my parents and told them what happened and where I was. They were pretty pissed at me, but said that they will pay for a tow truck to come get me out. My parents both drove small 4-door sedans, and they would have been zero help in this situation. I was about 45 minutes away from my house and the rest of most human civilization. So I realized that I would be stuck out there for at least an hour before someone was able to come and get me. It was a freaky feeling, but I tried getting it out of my head and just continued to listen to music and be on my phone in the car while I waited. Not really much more I could do. After I kind of calmed down from the initial anger I had, I started to check out my surroundings. I didn't even notice at first because of everything going on, but in front of my car's placement was a field that was full of the most amount of deer I think I've ever seen at once. There legitimately must have been at least 40 just walking around and eating grass. The field wasn't directly in front of my car, but if I was to get out and throw a rock in that direction, it would have been easy for me to be able to hit one of them. So, I'd say around 30 yards away. This didn't really help with the creepy level going on. Looking out in the front of the car and seeing 80 eyes reflected staring back at you is a bit alarming, but I was relieved it was just a field of deer. I watched them for a little bit, but I was quickly over it and started to just browse through my social media apps while I waited. They seemed to have gotten over it quicker than I did, because they all went back to walking around and eating once they figured out I wasn't going to do anything to them. I browsed my phone for about 15 minutes, when I finally got a call from my parents letting me know that a tow truck guy is on his way and about an hour and a half from my location. Still to this day, I remember hearing that and having the thought, you've got to be kidding.
God, such a bad
I
Michael
understood
Myers.
that me and only me was the reason I was in this situation. So I couldn't really be mad at anyone else. But that was very obviously not what I wanted to hear. I decided the smartest thing for me to do was to make sure all my doors were locked, lay back in my seat, and take a nap to pass the time quickly. So that's what I did. I wake up 45 minutes later to the feeling of being watched. I'm not sure if anyone has ever experienced that feeling before, because I don't know how common it is. But there was a sixth sense alarm going off in my head, telling me that I needed to wake up. Waking up to that feeling in the situation I was in, and the surrounding I was in, is probably worst case scenario. I sit up and immediately check my surroundings and see nothing. I looked through my car very quickly for any sort of weapon and found a pocket knife. I was very scared, even though I heard and saw absolutely nothing. That feeling is terrifying. I was shocked to see that the field of deer in front of me was still full of deer. I don't know anything about the animal, but I guess I always just assumed they didn't hang around in the same place for too long.
So pretty.
I called my parents back to see if they had any kind of update from the tow truck. I decided to not mention the feeling I was having because I didn't want them to worry more. And I also knew that it was literally nothing more than a feeling I had, and had nothing to back up why I was feeling that way, other than just being spooked out in general. No update from the tow truck guy, so we assumed everything was still fine on his end. The call lasted just a few minutes, because I felt like such a
You dingleberries, why do you guys let him stock up like that? My god. He should not be that full. God.
I could tell they were annoyed
Dinglings.
at the situation, but worried. I told them I'll make sure to tell them when the guy arrives, and that I was sorry. We hung up, and I looked up from the phone and immediately went from 0 to 100 in panic mode. The deer in front of me were all completely perked and staring in the same direction, right at them. Let me remind you that there are around 40 deer in this field. Every single one of them was stopped dead in their tracks, standing completely still, looking at something. I put my high beams on and started waiting for absolutely anything to happen at all. Nothing. I tapped my horn real quick, and they didn't even budge or look my way. They were all still completely glued to what was by them. The way the tree line was, I couldn't see that far over into the field. I knew they were looking into the woods by them, but where I was only able to see them. I could hear my heartbeat. I grabbed that pocket knife and just waited for something to happen. I would say it was about a minute after I honked. Every single one of them in unison started to run in the opposite way. They were running at full speed, and within 20 seconds the field was devoid. I was petrified in fear. I knew that staying in my car is what would be the safest thing to do, but it's the worst feeling in the world when you feel like a sitting duck. My head was on a swivel. I was freaking out in every way possible, and I assumed that it was a bear or something, but it could have been absolutely anything. I was convinced at that point it was the devil himself. I don't know what to do. I knew that the tow truck was close by, but I had no idea where he was. I began to shake because of the nerves and just looked around to make sure nothing was with me, and focusing on the field in front of me. I did this for what felt like an eternity, sitting in complete silence and darkness in the middle of nowhere, waiting for something to jump out and attack me. 15 of the longest minutes of my life go by, and I start to see lights break through the tree line on the road. As it gets closer, I see it's the tow truck guy. The lights on his truck felt like it was Jesus coming from heaven to rescue me. He gets up to me, and I jump out my car and immediately ask him if he has a gun on him. I told him very quickly what just happened, and that something is definitely out here nearby. He let me know he had a shotgun in the truck, and assured me that it was most likely a bear or bobcat. He gave me the whole, they're more scared of you than you are of them. The tree was small enough for him to sort of bulldoze it out the way, and then he attached my car to his and pulled me out of the spot. He was very nonchalant about what I had just experienced, but I was pretty badly shaken up from it. The whole time he was doing his thing, I had my eyes glued out in that field waiting.
There are 5 things you need to know to start your day.
waiting for something. He was completely done in about 15 minutes and told me to follow his truck out of there onto the main road again. I got in my car and was ready, more than anything, to get the hell out of this park. We started to drive away from that spot, and I still had my head on a swivel, completely shaken. As we were driving away, I look in my rearview mirror. We were down the road, just a tiny bit, but I could still see the spot that I was stuck in. It was partially lit from the vehicle's lights and the moon. I watched in my rearview mirror as a man came out of the tree line behind where my car was and walked into the middle of the road and watched us drive away. My heart stopped beating. Legitimately, I lost my breath and my eyes started to get full of tears because of how absolutely scared I was in this moment. I couldn't see any sort of detail, like what he looked like, or even necessarily what he was wearing. To be honest, I didn't really care. The feeling that I felt driving away from that spot, knowing he was right there the whole time, watching me, as I was freaking out and looking around, watching me as I was completely alone for the longest time, maybe even coming right up to my window and watching me as I slept. That's a feeling. That's something I can't necessarily put into words. All these years later, and it still messes with me quite a bit. The entire time we were driving off, as long as I could see him, he didn't move, just watched us in the road. A million things went through my mind. I was scared there may have been multiple people up the road waiting for us. I was trying to figure out if I could start beating on my horn like crazy to get the tow truck guy to stop or not. I decided that all I wanted to do was to get out of there more than anything. And the second that we finally got out of the park and were able to go onto a two-lane road again, I flew past the tow truck driver and did nothing below 70 miles an hour the entire way home. I flew through the stop signs and absolutely did not care. The only thing on my mind was making it home. I got home, ran inside, very quickly acknowledged my parents and said sorry and thank you, and went to my room. I didn't get a single second of sleep for the rest of the night. I was searching for any sorts of records of things happening in that area, escaped convicts, similar stories, and I came to the conclusion that the man was some sort of squatter or homeless. I read many things online about how common it is for homeless in rural areas to build shelters in the woods, which does make sense. But obviously, the unknown is the scariest part of it all. What if he wasn't homeless? What if he was going to hurt me? What if? There are so many possibilities of what could have happened. But the outcome that did happen is what I am most grateful for. I never told my parents this story until many years after it happened, and I was already an adult and moved out. It freaked them the hell out too when I shared it. I never went back to that park, ever. Even though I no longer live by there, I still have no desire to go near there at all. I don't think I even could in broad daylight with a ton of people around. I also made the decision to stop doing these late night cruises. I did a few after that time with people, but even then I felt uncomfortable and on edge. So man in the woods, let's never meet again. The desert is a scary place for me now. It used to be a place filled with peace and serenity. But since living out there for almost 30 years, you see things. This occurrence took place in the high desert of California in the mid-90s. The whole town was once all military.
Get it? That's
there is a military plant there and a prison. The streets to this day consists of numbers and letters. For example, Avenue O and 178th Street. You always heard stories of people missing and underground tunnels. In fact, a friend of mine kept getting a draft coming in from his closet in his childhood home. After he grew up, he checked it out and found an opening to one of these such tunnels. He
You ready,
called me
team?
over to check it out,
Bonzi,
but
where you
after
is?
I got there and we went through the opening, I was too freaked out to go more than 10 feet in. When I turned around and told him, this might be how people disappear. You always saw things late at night off in the distance, far past the lights of the small town. Strange glowing lights that shot straight up, and things in the sky that you never spoke about. Life was pretty carefree back then. If you wanted to visit though, you would have to drive down long desert roads, and sometimes end up coming home late at night in the pitch black, because there were no streetlights. I remember coming home late one night with my boyfriend at the time, and another friend, and we pulled over for some reason. Something compelled me to get out of the car and look to the stars.
Bonzi's loading in
We
now.
were in the middle of nowhere, but we could hear what sounded like machinery and muffled clanks from metal. We all started looking around, but didn't see anything. Just then, we felt a vibration under our feet. I crouched down on the street and put my ear to the ground. It was coming from under us. We all listened intently and heard far down voices, but couldn't make out what was being said. We all stood up and were discussing what it might have been when we saw a small red light on the horizon that was getting closer. We piled into the car and got out of there. We only shared this with a few friends, and they had experienced the same thing. A year later, I told a friend that I had started a small business hauling, but there was a big job, so I needed to borrow a trailer. He said he had a few so I could use
What's
one,
up, bro?
and that I should go back to his property to check it out. It was just starting to get dark
You
when
got
he
two
pulled
S's
out
in a
his new
row,
toy.
bro.
It was military-grade night vision binoculars. He told me to wait until it got dark to leave, because he wanted to show me something creepy. I was all in. Later, we walked towards the back of his property, looking out at nothing. No lights, no roads, nothing but the barren desert. He pointed the binoculars east, and oh my, there were people out there coming out of the ground and moving around. What the hell am I looking at?
Is that the
He told me
family?
his family called them ground dwellers, and they're located in various parts of the desert. It gave me the heebie-jeebies,
I use these
and
two
needless to
prints too.
say, I never went to his house after dark
Although
again.
sometimes I'm not sure if I like this
At
one.
one point, we were living in a mobile home park
Yeah.
past Avenue F.
Just let's
There
make it
was a
round
huge
faster.
tree in
Yeah,
my
that's you
yard,
can arrange.
left by the former
that's the
renter.
reason why sometimes
The
I
only way to get
use
up
it to
into
cross
it
the map real quick
was a
to do
hole
a
that was cut
generator,
into
and
the
then it's not
floor
up
with a
until
door on it. Under that was a rope ladder.
When sometimes
One
like,
night
we'll
I
just
was
go to
sitting
run
on
a
the
few
porch
steps and
drinking a
forget that
cup
I
of
have it,
tea
and me
when I
God
heard
damn,
something
she's
move
wrong.
up in the treehouse, and then a head popped up. It was a lady and her husband hiding. Clearly,
Because of that,
I thought they were on drugs.
exactly.
I told them to come down from there, but they didn't want to. It wasn't until I threatened to call the authorities did they cautiously comply, looking all around, not wanting to be seen. By now, there's a small group of my friends and nosy neighbors gathering around, and I saw that she was terrified by something, so I asked them to come in. I made them something to eat and waited for her to calm down. She pulled out these papers. They were drawings and schematics. They looked like legal documents with government letterhead. Some of them had embossed seals and had smoke damage, even a few burnt around the edges. She told me that they were checking out this place off Barrel Springs Road. There were 2 or 3 cinder block structures there. I knew them well. A few years back I happened upon that place, and a black truck rushed down to greet me with guns drawn. She said the same thing happened to her, but she was in one of the structures, so she grabbed some of the things and her husband ran. I went over these pages and felt very uneasy reading them. Like, this was stuff people get killed over if you got out. Stupidly, I said, "Why don't you just give them back?" She said they had been running, and everywhere they went, they saw a black car or van with government places showing up, just sitting there watching them. Well, I really didn't want to get too involved, especially after reading what I did. It wasn't too big for me, and I will take what I saw to the grave. So I packed them a lunch and told them they could sleep in the treehouse for the night. They did, but were gone early next morning. After that, we started seeing black vans parked on our lonely road facing the house. At one point, I even went up to one of them,
What's up?
but they took off as soon as I knocked on their blacked-out driver's window. Lots of unexplained things happened out there in the desert. You don't see much of it now, I think because there are more lights and people, well-lit towns and camera phones pointing in every direction. There weren't cell phones to call for help back then. I remember one time a few years later. It was a fun day. Some friends and I were in this stupid little red car called a Yugo that seemed to be on its last legs most of the time. This is where my friend's uncle told him that there was a whole abandoned town far west of the Mojave Desert, and that there were things just left there all over the place. We were so dumb. It took us a long time to get out there, and if you ask me to try and find it now, I don't know if I could. I wasn't driving, not that I would ever want to. Thinking we were lost a few times, we started seeing things. The carnival ticket booth on a trailer, broken tractors and furniture, little shacks here and there, and empty water bottles everywhere. There wasn't a store or place of business for many, many miles. I wondered how anyone could even survive in a place like this. And that's when we saw it. It was long, and looked like a single wide mobile home, if you could even call it a home. It was between 60 to 80 feet long, and it was raised with the siding going all the way to the ground. It looked like something from a horror movie. It had windows lined all the way around the front of the house with old frayed curtains still hanging up and blowing in the desert breeze. There were open sections of missing siding, exposing the darkness under the house. There were dusty cars with their front doors and trunks open cans and trash all over the place, and a small fire pit in the middle of all of this.
This is all Addie's fault.
His girlfriend and
Addie
I
left
saw
without
people
you.
that seemed to not be wearing any clothes.
Blame Addie,
But
Bonzi.
their bodies weren't like ours. They were inside that house and were watching us from
I heard
the
her. She
windows
said,
and from the
"Fuck
open
Bonzi.
spaces under the house.
I don't want to play with them." That's
They
what
were
I heard.
following us, and we were driving the length of the house.
But I told her no, I
As we
have to play
slowly
with
drove
Bonzi.
past,
Bonzi's my
they
knight
went
in
from
shining
window to
armor.
window and space under the house to space. They were almost inhuman. They had big eyes and pale skin, far too pale for the desert. He pulled up next to the fire pit, and despite our protests to go, he turned off the car, and his girlfriend began to cry out that we had to leave now. He didn't see what we
Wagga.
saw. "Stop, babe, this stuff's cool," he said. Oh my gosh. I wanted to punch him in the face. We both kept looking
You
at the
would win
people
the fight.
watching us,
I'm
while
tired.
begging him to get back into the car. He picked up a long bone and was moving the soot around the fire pit. Hey, looks like someone cooked a dog. Just then he looked up at his girlfriend, leaned over to the driver's seat and grabbed his jacket and started to pull. And he finally saw what we were seeing and we said, "Oh shit." The thing under the house was swaying back and forth with his hands on both sides of the opening of the siding. He was staring at us almost with intent to lunge. He tried to start the car, but it
Yeah.
failed. Thinking this was the
Oh
end.
yeah, Addie? Is that
Eaten
how you
in
feel?
the desert. I started to beat on the back of his seat, screaming to start the car, and after 3 tries, we tore out of there in a cloud of dust. We pulled over far from that location and tried to compose ourselves. Never, ever would we return. I don't think ghost towns from this point on.
I fucked up.
We didn't talk about what we saw after that. I think we were in disbelief that it even happened. There were so many things that occurred in the desert back in the day. Too many to even come close to tell you. But I do believe that there are things we do not, and maybe will never, understand them. Also, just a tidbit of information. Rosamond way back in the day was a toxic dump site. That's why the houses were so cheap. You ask anyone now, and they won't know what you're talking about. This story dates back to July last year. It has enough weirdness that I find myself puzzling over exactly what happened quite regularly. My friends' reactions sometimes make me wonder if this is just a big old self-gaslighting experience. But yet, when I go over the details, there is enough deep weirdness that it only leaves two real options. I'll let you be the judge. A few years ago, my best friend Toby took a cross-country grand position in Brisbane, a big, tumultuous thing for our group of friends, and amid the 3 AM power-drunk confessionals and promises to not lose touch, was a promise of the road trip. However, life found a way to make our drunk promises seem very disingenuous, and 18 months later, we'd hardly spoken barring a few crowded hours when he'd flown over for a family obligation. Eventually, the stars aligned mid-July last year, and myself, Toby, and 2 other friends, Chris and Alec, were able to get the band back together. Queensland is a weird mix of tropical paradise, dead space, crocodiles, and genuine social backwardsness. Queensland is very, very much the Florida of Australia. Australia is huge. Not just huge, but vast and extremely empty. There is on average 3.1 people every square kilometer, and 90% of those people live in 7 or 8 major cities. If you think Reddit is an echo chamber, you've never had the pleasure of sinking a few cooling foodies with a good old boys in outback Queensland. The Australian geography makes it really easy to get 100% removed from society, and is something I often appreciate about the country. But the distance can be daunting at times, because if things go wrong, nothing is close. Everything is amplified by distance. Our plan was to fly in, cram 4 dudes and 2 weeks worth of supplies into Toby's family sedan, and straight book it 1,600 kilometers north from Brisbane to Cairns. Being fiscally unendowed, on a time schedule and outdoors inclined, we opted to keep driving most nights until we found an interesting/free campsite to pitch up in, which was a complex process of cross-referencing driver fatigue with the relative passive aggression of campsite comments, with the wiki campsite, worth every single penny if you ever travel in Australia. Generally speaking, we opted for road stops, but one night after staying too late in a particularly nice town, 1770 if anyone is playing at home, and reading a few particularly average reviews of the rest stop up the road, we decided to go off-piste and camp in an unmarked but seemingly well-known campsite. Around 9 PM, we took a left off the highway, followed the Wikicamp's directions towards our campsite, about 2.5 kilometers away from the Bruce Highway. Despite the remoteness, we found the campsite, a small 30-meter clearing between the banks
easy
of an
free
apparent
toolbox.
croc-filled river and tall gum trees already occupied by a single caravan attached to a 4-wheel drive. Being quite familiar with camping, I felt a little awkward intruding on what I'm sure the caravan owners assumed was a private spot, well after dark, and made a mental note to smooth over any grievances with a cup of tea and a good A, should we see the owners before we left. We started setting up the camp despite this frustratingly gravel-thick soil. Have you ever tried beating a tent peg into a rock? We weren't being particularly loud, but must have attracted our neighbor's attention because he flung open the caravan door within 2 minutes of us arriving and started one of the weirdest conversations I have ever had. Expecting a grey nomad couple and a "please keep it down," I was surprised by the 55-ish, bushy-bearded man that approached us. He seemed erratically drunk and asked us if we had a bong, which we did not. I offered him a beer and he asked where we were from. We mentioned Perth and he asks our names. We went around the group and we asked his. "Oh, don't worry about that." And then he cleared his throat and made a joke. "You know,
Gonna hurry, Bunsy.
gay
I'm getting
prostitute."
fucking tired. Oh,
Mutual
goodness.
unexpected statement
Oh,
silence.
goodness. Oh, gosh.
"Yeah, I'm great, but the other boys don't enjoy it as much." There was awkward laughter. It was also important to note that Chris and Alec were not particularly interested in this conversation, preoccupied with tents. Minimal attention was being paid, and Toby had made more an effort to engage, but was tending to his swag, and I was more or less solely engaged in the conversation. Despite his awful joke, which I talked up to different cultural sensitivities, I asked us if he minded us camping here, and what was he up to tonight? "Oh no, I'm just watching the State of Origin. Rugby, you know. I'm having trouble making friends." He pondered for 10 seconds or so and then followed up with, "I used to have a good friend, but he was a cross-dresser, so I had to take care of him." He said it so naturally that my general human statement interpreter thought it was an off-joke, and auto-response had already kicked in by the time I realized what he had just said. "Oh, how far is the river from here? Are we in range of any crocs?" I asked before my brain could work out, "Oh, why?" "Oh, only 150 meters that way, with the shallow graves. You know my friend knows where some shallow graves are up in Hervenly Bay. But yeah, you know, being out here alone, I wouldn't worry about the crocs. Do you promise not to kill me if I promise not to kill you?" This was enough to trigger my dumb lizard brain, and a very rapid understanding of danger kicked in. "Oh, do you think Queensland will win the State of Origin?" "It would be embarrassing to lose all 3 games. What's the score anyway?" I asked in an attempt to show I'm less scared of the snake than it is of me. "Good point. Just come knock if you want some bourbon, boys," he said, as he walked the 10 meters to his caravan. I immediately turned to Toby and asked how much of that
Addy, ready up?
conversation he'd heard. He said not much, but enough to be a little shaken, and I asked if Toby had caught our bearded friend's name, and he replied he had not. I immediately insisted to my friend that we take a walk to the river, despite Alec repeatedly saying, "I'll be there in 5, just let me finish my tent." I made it very clear that we needed to see that river right now. In the very remote dark, we huddled around a smartphone torch, and I explained the conversation I had just had with our nameless gentleman. Alec and Chris, again, had only heard this guy being friendly, and asked our names and certainly didn't understand why I was being so edgy, despite my being fully aware that we were in an actual horror movie. I agreed to keep setting up and wait to see if anything happened. I immediately started scoping sizable rocks to use in a mano-a-mano fight to the end, should it come down to it. And 10 seconds after considering it, I asked Toby what we should do if our mate Taylor happened to have a firearm. He paused very briefly and then very quietly and aggressively pronounced we should get the hell out of there. We packed up extremely rapidly, one eye on the caravan at all times, and despite protestations from Alec, we got the hell out of there. I still have no idea if this guy was trying to play a big old joke on 4 mid-20s guys, or if there was something more sinister behind it. You can get away with a lot more if no one's around, and there aren't a whole load of people looking in rural Queensland. Either way, I'd rather never meet again. This story happened when I was working the 150-mile line between Nashville and Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was working a local job on that run called the Coan Pusher. with the mountain grade starting at Coan, basically going all the way down to Chattanooga. It can be a very difficult stretch of railroad. I had the third shift on the Cowan pusher. It was all I could hold even if I didn't enjoy working nights. We basically just sat in the shop and waited to be called to help tonnage trains get to Sherwood, Tennessee. Now, all I can say about Sherwood is picture the hills have eyes with banjos added in. On the night in question, it was around 11:50 p.m. when a heavy freight train stopped over at Sherwood and requested our help to get over the other side of the mountain. We climbed on the engines and got on our way. By the time we hit Coan and started curving up the foot of the mountain, we had no visibility of anything that wasn't illuminated by the locomotive light. We had a 30-minute ride ahead of us, along with a 2-mile-long dark tunnel in our path. As the clock struck midnight, we were now in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods filled with wolves, rattlesnakes, and a few mountain folk. Most of the mountain folk are nice, but don't let the sun set your ass in those woods. About 10 minutes later, the north portal of the tunnel was in sight. A bridge hung over the entrance. A branch line that was taken up long ago crossed it, going to another part of the mountains. The bridge is still accessible by ATV. As I looked up, I saw a campfire and people. They all looked to be dressed darkly, perhaps even in masks, and all I could see were their white faces. As we started under the bridge, we heard a thud over our heads on the locomotive roof. We proceeded through the dark tunnel and slowed just out of the south portal as the conductor looked out the back door with his flashlight. He saw nothing, so we shrugged our shoulders and proceeded on the last 10 minutes on our waiting train. It was 12:20 a.m. and we coupled on the rear of the train to push it from Sherwood. As the engineer on the head end entered the south portal of the tunnel, he radioed back to me talking about figures standing over the tunnel entrance. However, no one was there as it came in my sight. As we exited the north portal, I looked to the best I could to see on my side of the tracks for whatever had hit our roof. I saw what looked like a black cloak fluttering in the wind as we passed, but couldn't really tell. As we entered Coan, we uncoupled on the fly, and the train continued to Nashville. We cruised on into our parking track and tied our engines down. As we got off, we had the feeling of being watched, but thought nothing as we parked our asses in the office chairs. We had no more work for the rest of our shift. We just talked and napped on and off until 3 a.m. We never did shake the feeling of being watched. So we stepped outside as I put a pinch of dip in my lip, and my conductor lit a cigarette. As we both laughed with each other, we noticed movement in the brush across the tracks. Now I must remind you that both my conductor and myself are big country boys who don't scare easy. We went over to investigate. We found 3 hooded men in the bushes, with a huge spot of my tobacco. I asked them, "What are you doing here? You understand you're trespassing on railroad property, right?" The lead guy then spoke up in a demonic, gravelly tone. "We just want what's ours." As he said this,
Yeah,
he
that
motioned
sucks.
to the top of the locomotive. We looked to see a young man on the roof at the air horn. The young man was in nothing, not even underwear. And as we all looked at him, he bolted from the roof, climbed off and ran down the tracks. As this happened, the figures turned to chase. The lead guy then turns his head back towards us with glowing eyes that we could now see. He hustled, stared at us, and gave chase with his friends. We called the cops, and after hours of investigation, they found the man's underwear, with no traces of him or the cloaked individuals. We even took them up the mountains. Cops love free train rides. There was nothing. Now on occasion we find dead animals by the shop door or locomotive, mutilated. I've even found 1 or 2 at my door at home. We still occasionally see that same fire on the bridge and get the feeling of being watched. But it's all gone by the time we return. I'm sure there's a cult somewhere on that mountain. My name is Dakota. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I've lived here all my life. I lived in the city, but I love the outdoors. During the summer, I'm always out hiking with my friends or fishing and camping. It's the thing to do. One of my best friends is called George. He would always talk to me about his father's property out in Duchesne. They had a few acres with trailers and RVs scattered around this little sandy cliffside that they lived next to, that would actually drop you down into the canyon if you were brave enough to trek. He always would tell me about the freedom they had out there. You could go shooting wherever you wanted, even stand outside your own home butt ass naked, and no one would care, because no one was around to see you. So George had invited me to go out to his father's property with him, and I was really excited to go, since I'd never been out towards Duchesne. The drive there from Salt Lake City is about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, so it's a decent drive. When we arrived, I was pleasantly surprised to see his property was exactly as he explained it to me, and I loved it, and couldn't wait to get out and explore. I should remind you that his property was in the middle of nowhere, right off an old closed highway, and up a hill seriously in complete dry barren wilderness. There's cougars, bears, coyotes, rattlesnakes, and plenty of other animals that wouldn't mind making you their lunch. But even so, we carried protection, in order to ensure that nothing would happen. And that's another thing I need you to remember. We were armed to the teeth. George had recently brought an 18-inch sawed-off 12-gauge double-barreled shotgun, as well as an AK-47. His dad also owned a plethora of other weapons, which included a 30.30, .300 Ultima, a gauge pump action, a 24-inch long double barrel, and plenty other handguns and revolvers, so there was no fear of anything happening on our trip. I think we were there for about 3 or 4 days, just having tons of fun, shooting and hunting rabbits and snakes. But the last night we were there, something really, and I mean really weird happened to us, and I still can't explain what it was. So that last night we were there, George, his father, and I had been drinking and playing poker, and just having a fun time, when me and George decided to head up to a trailer where we could just hang out together and reminisce about the old days. We get to the trailer, and mind you, he has his agent, and I'm holding on to his sword off, and George decides to call his girlfriend back in Salt Lake to see how she's doing, and I didn't think anything of it at all. Until for some reason, while they were on the phone, they brought up the subject of a Wendigo. Us being out in the middle of nowhere and kind of getting creeped out, we told her to cut it out and quit trying to scare us, because we had this dumb belief that if you even mentioned a Wendigo, you would just be stalked by it, even though we knew that they were just myths. As George is speaking with his girlfriend on the phone, I'm laying on his sofa, right next to an open window on the right side of the trailer, and I swear to God, I see what looked like a person in the distance in the shrubbery and small trees, walking back and forth, almost trying to conceal themselves, but not doing a very good job. At this point I told George what I'm seeing, and he starts to worry his girlfriend, because she's hearing us talk out loud about how we think we're being watched. George gets off the phone with his girlfriend, and just now
fucked up.
reminds me that the trailer we were in did not have a lock on it. We have to get out of there. As I'm saying this, I noticed that the figure had gotten closer to the trailer.
It's the end of the world, and Bonzi knows it.
One thing I saw that I literally burnt into my brain was this thing's neck. It was too long to be a normal human. It stretched out and almost caused its head to bob around like a weight on top of a loose spring. Once I said this, he wasn't against leaving, but mentioned that we would have to go outside where this guy was if we wanted to get anywhere. So we made a very difficult choice. We only had a small electric lantern that would only illuminate about 5 or 6 feet in front of us, as we're standing back to back with our weapons in hand, literally ready to shoot anything that approaches us. We just stood back to back and circled around and around as we walked to the other trail that was about 50 yards away, and during that time we were hysterical. We didn't hear any footsteps following us as we made our way to the other trailer. This is when things get a bit messed up. When we finally got to the other one, the trailer that had a lock on it, we tried to be as silent as we could. We didn't even want to risk looking out the windows or moving the curtains to give away where we were. About an hour passes, and at this point we think we're in the clear, and the next thing we know, we are looking at the shadow of this thing standing directly in front of the moonlight, in front of the curtained window, standing completely still. We are just about to defecate in our pants. Then as soon as it was there, it was gone. We didn't see it move, didn't hear it, just looked back, and it had vanished. The oddest thing happened after this, though. I started to hear a pig, like it was in its pen waking up a storm, and I turned to George and asked him if he heard what I heard, and we just heard this weird disembodied voice come from outside the trailer. Oink! Not like a pig, but a person. This voice was sinister, like they wanted us to know that we were afraid, and it was said mockingly. I don't know if this was just some guy, in a weird way, trying to get around terrorizing random people's property. I have no clue, but I didn't want to go back and find out. If anyone has any information or could help me figure out what was happening, I would very much appreciate it. Till then, I'm trying not to think about it. I live in a very small town of about 100 people in rural New South Wales, Australia. This happened when my friends and I were 14.
Are you guys
My town
coming,
used
or
to be
what's
a
going
very
on?
close-knit farming community, but the shift to modern times and the massive drought of the 2000s led to most of the businesses to be closed and farmers to move away. The aging population slowly died, and their houses were filled with despicable types, drug dealers and addicts, thieves and dull bludgers. It's sad really, but even now there are still great people here. What I've always found creepy is even though a very small population, and I've known just about everyone since before I can remember, there have always been people in the surrounding area that no one seems to know. Old loners mostly who keep to themselves, and no one ever sees them. On top of that, there have been several depraved people with interests in minors. There have also been numerous break-ins and attempted break-ins in our homes, not to mention that for long stretches of time we've been without a police officer, which means a 000 call would take an hour for help to arrive. It gets even creepier. The further the bush you go, I've heard of abandoned farmsteads where families have just vanished, with all their belongings including their cars left behind. There was even a multi-generational inbred family reminiscent of the Hills Have Eyes, discovered a few years ago, though that was a few hundred miles from me. I grew up and went to primary school here, but we had to travel an hour to get to
starting
high
to
school.
lose the battle with
It took quite a while
tiredness.
for my closest childhood friends, Tim and I, to make new friends. After 2 years of high school, we invited 3 friends to come out to town to go camping. Tim's parents owned a small property where they kept sheepdogs and horses a few miles from the town. We camped for 5 days there in the school holidays. The first night, as what often happens, we sat around the campfire telling stories. I told the story of some of those creepy loners I mentioned earlier, a pair of brothers that lived a few miles up the road from where we were camping. They were rarely ever seen, with a reputation of being creepy hillbilly hicks. I told them the story of how one night they had tried to cripple my father over him, supposedly stealing their business. They ambushed him at the local weighbridge at night. My father managed to fight both of them off, and my cousin also had a run-in with them by taking a shortcut across their field, only to hear a firearm shot in his direction. My cousin had lied to me before, so I wasn't sure if it was true, but I made out like it was and later embellished their reputation with the normal inbred cannibal type crap city folk expect. On the second night, we decided to go for a night walk. We were kids and enjoyed fantasy movies and games and had a bit of role-playing fun. One of us was too scared to go out in the dark, so on our walk we decided to play a prank on him. We started screaming and running back to camp, saying, "He got Henry!" It worked, and our friend was scared. Zeb tried to climb an electric fence to escape. Henry, came back dirty and bloody, and we hid in a farmhouse until Tim ruined the prank by claiming he heard the brother skinned people, which caused us to burst out laughing. The next afternoon, we hiked up the nearest hill, called Sims Gap Hill. It was a popular walk for Tim and I when we were kids. The fastest way to get to the hill was by taking the dirt road called the Stock Route, which ran parallel to the main tar road which led to the town. The two roads are connected by another called Sawmill Road, which was at the base of the hill. We walked down the Stock Route, and I pointed out the Hillbilly Brothers property as we went past it. All you can see from the road are piles of rusted old cars. We reached Sawmill Road and walked across the paddock to the hill and had an enjoyable time. We started climbing down the hill as it got late, but underestimated the time it took to walk across the paddock to the road. By the time we reached the road, it was night, and of course, it happened to be pitch black. As we started walking down
Yeah, this
Sawmill
probably
Road
be my last
to the
one.
Stock
I'm kind
Route,
of
a pair of massive
zonked.
bright headlights turned onto the road from behind us. Naturally, we got off the road, which meant disappearing into the thick patch of trees between the road and the brothers' property. As the lights caught up to us, the vehicle started slowing. Up until then, we had thought it was a farmer's ute, but now we realized it was a very old, very loud tractor. Not wanting to be questioned by any meddling adult, I tried to encourage the guys to hide. The tractor slowed right down and flashed a spotlight into the trees and then sped away. The guys asked me who it was, and I said I didn't know. As we continued walking slowly, we saw the tractor turn around the Stock Route and then into the brothers' property. Now I was unnerved. The tractor came roaring down the fence line, and I yelled at the guys to run. We ran until we came to a small, well-hidden ditch, which we jumped in and lay very still. The tractor stopped right on us, and they shined the spotlight over the trees. It didn't illuminate the ditch, luckily. The driver stopped and got off the tractor, walked over to the fence, and I peered up and saw the silhouette of a dirty, disheveled man with messy hair standing at the fence line looking around. In his hands was a rifle. In a nasally Aussie hillbilly voice, he yelled out, "Where are you?" We didn't dare move. I started thinking what we'd have to do if he climbed the fence and started coming our way. But he eventually turned around, got back on his tractor, and left. It started with a groan and then rumbled down the other way. I got my friends up and we sprinted towards the Stock Route, ducking in the branches and jumping over fallen trees. We hadn't quite hit it when the headlights were behind us again, roaring up Sawmill Road. We made it to the road and panicked. It was still 2 or 3 miles back to the camp, and we wouldn't be able to outrun
My
the
reaction time is that
on
of
the
a
other side
dum-dum.
of the stock route was a state forest, with tens of miles of twisting dirt roads and motorbike trails and goat tracks. Despite how dark it was, with the strong possibility of getting lost, we dove in there. We hid as he went past us again, finding a forest road which led back to the general direction of town. We followed it for a while, wondering if he had given up, and if it was safe to go back on the stock route. Then he was in front of us, blinding headlights roaring down the forest road. We jumped back in the trees and decided to run. We ran straight past him. Behind us, he turned back on the stock route and chased us again. He circled us 4 times with us hiding, then running, then hiding, then running. When we had gone far enough that we thought we were close enough to the camp, we ran through the woods and jumped back on the stock route
Oh
to
my
be met
god.
by headlights.
What are we doing, boys?
Tim's mother had come looking for us after finding our camp empty. She'd finally found us and we were still a mile or so from camp. We quickly piled in and she drove us back. We told her what happened, but she and my parents just said they're weird people and to stay away from them in future. I'm a 20-year-old female, and I live in a very religious state and grew up in a very religious household. But I myself have never been religious nor spiritual. I'm an atheist, horror enthusiast, and the paranormal has just never been something that scared me, but always something that's interested me. My hood rat friends and I love to go and explore abandoned towns and buildings. I've been doing this since I was 16 and never had any scary encounters other than some rats and raccoons. This past summer, my friend suggested we go visit one of our state's oldest cemeteries that's about 30 minutes up a canyon I live right next to. As we entered the tiny town, and maybe 30 very old houses, he took me down a separate street to show me an old abandoned schoolhouse. Normally we would get out and go explore, but it was the middle of the day and raining heavily, so we just passed by. There's a plaque on the top of the school that reads 1904 and is surrounded by other very old abandoned cabins. All of the entryways were boarded up, and it appeared that there was no way in. It was an absolutely beautiful building, and I was very intrigued. The next night, I decided to go back up there with another friend of mine. We both get off work super late, so we didn't even end up heading up there until about 1:30 a.m. The drive up the canyon was fine. We listened to music and joked the entire time. But the second we turned onto the road leading us to this small ghost town, I felt sick to my stomach. I honestly can't even explain the exact feeling that I felt, other than pure terror and dread. I kept trying to write it off as general anxiety from driving so far in the dark. But as we got closer to school, the worse the feeling became. As we approached the building, I nervously suggested that we just drive around and see the building 360. As we did, I looked down at one of the doors that were completely boarded off the night before, and one door was open. Mind you, it had been raining for the past 48 hours.
Yeah, this
and
killer's
no
just
way
fucking
that someone
stupid.
would have went down there and opened that door. We pulled up down the street of the school, next to one of the much older, very abandoned cabins. Reluctantly, I got out the car and locked the door. I thought that maybe I was overreacting, and that I just needed to take a Xanax or something and calm down. But when I looked at my friend, I could tell he was very uneasy as well. Very out of character for the both of us. We started walking up the street towards the schoolhouse. The feeling in my stomach got worse, and before I knew it, we were standing on the road in front of the schoolhouse. I looked down at my feet, about to step onto the grass. Every single fiber in my body was telling me not to step into the property. I'd never felt this feeling this strong before, I've never been this scared in my life. I wrapped my arm around my friends and forced myself to step onto the grass, even though I knew I shouldn't have. I started to walk around outside the building, just to get a closer look of the outside. We're about 15 steps in when we come around the side of the building to a ton of trees. We kept walking. Before I could even open my mouth to express how fearful I was, my eyes welled up with tears, and at the same time, we both stopped walking. Neither of us could physically take another step, no matter how hard either of us tried. We both looked at each other, and without saying a single word, bolted back to my car. The ride home, we both came out clean and told each other how scared we were. My friend got really quiet and said, "I don't believe in the paranormal, but when we first drove around the school, I looked up and saw this girl staring at me from one of the windows." The scary thing is about how this isn't just the fact that he saw this. There's little to no information about this town whatsoever, but the one only thing I found on the school were 2 separate Facebook posts. One saying, "I wanted to go in and explore this building, but as I drove towards it I got such a bad feeling I had to turn around and leave." And the other, "I felt like I was being watched the entire time I lived across the street. One day I opened my window to find a little girl staring at me from one of the windows in the school." The rest of the night, I was too scared to sleep. I ended up calling my friend back over, and we just sat on the couch in my living room and watched Disney films to make us feel better. But in the days passing, I couldn't help but feel like I wasn't alone. I kept having super strange and vivid dreams. I didn't feel comfortable sleeping in my room anymore. Fast forward 2 weeks. That weekend was my friend's birthday, so we'd been drinking for the past 2 days at an Airbnb. My liver loves me, and I know it. One of my friends and I went back to my house to grab a few things, and I had a shower while we were there. He was super tired, and still a little intoxicated, and I told him he could lay down on the couch in my room and take a nap while I showered. After I had showered, I got dressed and walked back into my room, and I'll never forget this. My friend, mind you, was half drunk and half asleep, looks up at me and says, "Who's the guy in your closet?" It didn't really register to me at first, so I laughed and replied, "There's no one in my closet." He looks at me very seriously and says, "No, there's a man standing in your closet." He then woke up fully and explained that he was having a strange dream, but then it clicked. I felt the overwhelming sense of dread flow over me again. I had brought something back with me. I ended up begging my mother to have a priest come bless our home, again very out of character for me, and after the blessing I immediately felt comfortable and happy in my home again. But I think that's more of a mental thing for me, just being raised in a strict religious household, because I'm still definitely not religious. I still don't know what to make of this experience. I don't know what I believe anymore, but I'm convinced that there was something watching over me that night when I went to the schoolhouse, because I had a feeling that if I'd actually have gone in, it would have gotten a lot worse. This happened about 26 years ago. My friend Jack and I were driving an RV, pulling an old truck bed conversion trailer to Yucca Valley. He made a deal with a friend of ours to trade his RV for a running truck. We were driving an old highway 247, where there was nothing, just flat sand and an occasional rock formation. I remember we passed a rolling sandhill overlooking winding roads of nothing, and it was dark. I was laying on the side couch taking a nap, while he called out for me to come up front and look at what he was seeing. They looked like lit balls of red fire darting past each other, going up and down about a mile ahead of us, and they seemed to be coming in our direction. As they got closer, we noticed that about 4 of them bunched together making one. Then 4 more joined them. Jack slowed down.
I got one more in me
and
if
we
you
were
guys want
hoping they
one
would
more.
go away, but they didn't. They opened the window, but we never heard a sound, and they just seemed to hover. Jack thought screw it, and started driving faster. That's when they all dispersed and flew towards this rock hill, and Jack floored it. We were all freaked out. As we were driving, we heard a bang from the back of the RV. So we ran back there trying to keep our balance because Jack was driving like a bat out of hell. And when I looked out the back window, I saw the trailer with something sparkling in the middle of it. I turned my head to tell him, but by the time I turned back, there were flames right where the sparks were. At the time, the red lights were gone, just gone. Jack pulled over, grabbed the small fire extinguisher by the stove, and we stood by the door, but we were too scared to go outside. With a few exhales, he puffed up his chest, swung open the door, and ran out the trailer. I had a big flashlight, and I trailed behind him. The flames were getting pretty big, lighting up the desert around us, and it took a while to put it out.
I forgot
as
to
we were looking
spectate Abby.
above
I
and
didn't
around
realize she was the
us.
last one left.
Jack jumped in the trailer to see what had caught fire, but all he found was a shard of pointed metallic pieces strewn around in a dent in the bottom of the trailer bed. I jumped at the trailer because I didn't want to be standing on the ground alone. Just then we heard something about 40 feet behind us on the passenger side. I shined my light, but we didn't see anything. It was quiet, not a car or light in sight. We heard it again. It sounded like gravel, like when you scrape your shoe on dry dirt, but it was closer. Jack thought he saw something, so he took the flashlight. I, of course, was holding onto him so close, I could feel his heart thump through his ribs. He turned the light on, where we heard the noise, and it looked like around 5 piles of sand, like little mounds in a row. Then the noise stopped. We started to jump out the trailer, and we heard it again. Jack beamed the light and caught the flash of some reflective diamond-shaped eyes that quickly disappeared. Then those sandy dirt mounds began moving towards us at the same time, as if something small was pushing them from behind. Jack grabbed me. We jumped and ran towards the RV doors, and I don't think either of us had ever run
Last
that
one
fast
for us,
before.
ladies and gentlemen.
He put the RV in drive and we
My
sped.
eyes.
We
Can't
heard
keep
things
open my
hitting
eyes.
the back like rocks being thrown, but we didn't falter. We were constantly looking around, and I stayed right next to him. By the time we got to a small town, the RV was sputtering. Jack didn't understand why. It was in perfect shape before we left, so we pulled over to check the engine, and under a streetlight, he took a walk around and saw that the hot tailplate had been curled up, like folded up facing the back of the bumper. When he looked up, he saw all of the back window screens were shredded, and the rubber around the glass was hanging. He took some tools and some gloves and straightened the pipe, and we drove a bit longer to our friend's house. We told our friend what happened, but he didn't believe us. The next day when we woke up, our friend came in asking what the hell we did to the RV. So when we looked at it, it looked like the glass was etched with scratches up where the screens were shredded. We had no explanation as to what could have cut glass like that, and there were dents on the top and the back. In one spot on the side, there was what looked like an impression of 5 fingers with nail holes at the end of them and a wide thumb. Needless to say, Jack had to pay our friend for the damage to the RV, and we took his new truck and drove the long way back home, and we never spoke about it to anyone again. He kept a few of those metallic shards. He said that when he held them it felt soft, but when he accidentally dropped it, it turned sharp and hard again. He told me that he had to get rid of them because the more he handled them, the more he noticed his hands would start to blister, and he didn't want his kids to get a hold of it. I kick myself now, because if I had known back then it was so significant, I would have asked him to let me keep them. 5 years ago it was daytime, and I was driving with my son in my small truck. We were following my ex in his car, and we ended up in that same spot. It didn't dawn on me that we were going that way. I started to hyperventilate, and my son had to calm me down. You see, it was times like this that really made me hate the desert. A few years back, my older sister and I decided we wanted to go for a walk in a nearby park. It was early summer, and we had decided that we wanted to get healthy and eat better, which never happened, by the way. So we decided that walking would be a good
never
way to
happened, by
introduce
the way.
any sort of exercise to our lives. A little background info on this park and the surrounding area. We lived in a town where almost everything was named after Native American / First Nation tribes and names. Our local school district was a Native American name, our roads and our parks. This park in particular seemed to have many rumors that it was an old burial ground, but I thought that's nonsense, and something that just dumb kids like to tell each other during sleepovers. The park is made up of cleared hills with a small paved path, kind of meandering through. If you follow the path all the way back, you have the option to stay on the pavement and return to the beginning, or to go off onto a separate unpaved path into a small forest. We have felt like we hadn't burnt enough calories yet, and decided to keep walking deeper in. After walking for about 5 minutes, we came to a small clearing that had 6 distinct paths branching off. The clearing had a sign claiming that all the paths looped back around, and a few facts about the path. We decided to go through one, and that we'd see how we felt once we returned to the clearing.
Got me.
When we had returned, we decided that we were probably sweaty enough and that we could go home to make lunch. We had gone back down the path where we were sure it led to the front of the park, all the while talking about silly stuff that the two of us had gotten up to in the past few days. After walking for a little bit, we joked that it always felt longer after we decided we wanted to walk home. And then, seemingly like magic, the path we went down had led us back to the
Isn't that unfortunate?
We looked at each other, both saying it was weird, and then laughed it off, as us not being the most trustworthy with directions. We decided to make sure this time that the path we went down was the same path the sign was facing, seeing as it greeted us when we first arrived to the clearing. I was sure we had done that the first time round, but wasn't 100% sure. However, when we did that, it had led us back around again to the same clearing.
Oh really?
We
We're
decided
gonna
to go down a different
we're gonna
path,
puppy guard me?
the only one directly to the right of the path we had taken before. Maybe we just didn't realize that the sign wasn't directly in front of the path. Still, we were led back to the clearing. We decided to make a system.
Oh, what a
and to
joke.
always go right of the path we had taken, so that we didn't lose track. I remember us making jokes about how it would be the two of us to die in the woods. It's only a mile away from home. Or how the Blair Witch is probably mad at us, and that if we saw a pile of rocks, not to mess with them. We were very light-hearted throughout the entire thing. However, in the back of my mind, something wasn't right. The more and more we walked, the more I felt like something was watching us. I couldn't express it to my sister, for fear of her making fun of me. Or worse, she's saying she felt the same way. And it wasn't the type of watching as though we were being hunted or stalked. It was like whatever was watching us was finding humor in us being lost. It wasn't outright threatening, but it gave a very uneasy feeling. When we had made it to the 6th and final path, we laughed at our luck, at it being the last path to choose. We talked about maybe going swimming later on. We were both now quite sweaty. However, when the path ended, it didn't take us back to the front of the path. It was the same exact clearing we had been stuck in for the past few hours. I didn't know what to think. Maybe our system was flawed, and we had to think of a new way to make sure we weren't taking the same path over and over. As we both stood there in silence, partially from being dumbfounded and partially from being out of breath, I swore I heard something chuckle behind us in the trees. It could have been my imagination, or it could have been an animal, but all I remember is saying, "Screw this," and making a beeline into the woods. My sister began asking me what I was doing and following me, and I explained
What a
that if we
face
just
camper,
walked
man.
straight and didn't turn, we would make it out. She agreed, and didn't seem to object to trampling through high grass, thorns, and trees, which made me feel like she had felt strange about the situation too. When we finally saw a break in the trees,
Sorry, Addie,
we
you're kind of
sighed
just
with relief.
screwed.
We walked
Kinda
right
just
out of
screwed.
the woods into the backyard of someone's house in a nearby housing development. Walked around the front and saw an older lady sitting on her front porch drinking lemonade. She asked us where we came from, and we said we got lost in the woods and asked where we were. She didn't seem shocked in the slightest. "Oh yeah, those woods will do that to you."
He was guarding
She
you?
offered
Yeah.
us some
That's
lemonade,
puppy dog, and it's
I
kind of
went back
stupid.
to our car. We took the lemonade but decided to go back to the car walking. We were a long way away, but we declined, as it would be fine as long as we stuck to the roads. Anyway,
Yeah, no one could have got you. I
no
didn't
one
have
believes
borrowed
me when I
time.
say how creeped
The only
out
time you can prevent that is
I
if
know
somebody
that
has borrowed
feeling
time, but
disappeared as
even
soon
then.
as we left the woods. All I know is whatever was in those woods wasn't happy that my sister and I were there, and I'm not going back to see what will happen again. So my cousin and I thought it would be a good idea to visit a ghost town that was located nearby. We had
What
heard
the
stories
fuck is
from
that
neighbors
shit?
saying they saw a woman in
That's
a
stupid.
dress standing or walking
That's so
by the side
dumb.
of the road. Whenever they'd pass her, their cell phones would either
Oh my
die or
goodness.
completely lose signal. And one of my cousins said his car stopped working as soon as he passed the woman. 7 of us got into a big van and went to the ghost town to see if all the paranormal activity was true. We were talking and laughing in the van, making fun of the people who did get scared of the town and that they were just probably imagining things. None of us had been to a ghost town before, and we didn't know when we would reach it. As we crossed a bridge that led to the ghost town,
No, you should have waited a second.
a huge
Oh,
fog
we're
appeared out
dead.
of nowhere and covered the whole town and bridge. The laughter in the van died, and it was dead quiet, because we knew we had entered the ghost town area. We parked the van on a dirt road that was a little further than the entrance to the ghost town. We turned off the car.
Holy shit, how did it get so fast?
Into the dark, empty houses. It felt as if the houses were full of ghosts.
Oh, it
just
scared the
looking
shit
at
out
the
of me.
van, as if we had invaded their
Ugh.
space. The atmosphere
Whatever,
was
you
so
guys
tense,
go.
And after 5 minutes of
Get
just
outta
sitting
here.
there in the dark, the driver of the van
Save
suddenly
yourselves.
turned the car around and drove out. We all wondered why he'd left so suddenly, and we asked him, but he wouldn't answer us. He parked at a nearby gas station, and his face was extremely pale. He finally started talking, and said he saw a little girl walking behind one of the houses, coming towards the van. He was so scared. You could see him trembling. He ran inside the gas station, and the cashier saw his pale face, and surprisingly, he just asked the driver if we'd just come back from the ghost town. We told the cashier that we
Ugh,
did,
I kind of want to play one
and
more.
that our driver supposedly saw a little ghost girl. The cashier told us that he had passed by the town a few times and saw the same thing. He advised us that if we wanted to experience something paranormal, we should wash the car down with those little window wash things that they have at gas stations. We thought this was a good idea, So we all went out and washed the car. We washed the top of the car, the sides, the doors and the windows and all the mirrors. Washed all the windows inside the car, and we took paper towels and completely dried the car inside and out. We were at the gas station parking lot for a good 10 minutes, talking to
Bonzi
see
got
if we were
hooked
going to
on
go back to the
now.
ghost town or just go home. We agreed to switch drivers and
I
head
keep
back.
forgetting to hit the spectate
We went
button.
back onto the dirt road and travelled into the centre of town. We sat in the van for 15 minutes, just looking out for signs of a girl or signs of activity in the houses.
We'll play another one. We'll play one more.
Tense
Fuck
the
it.
atmosphere
We'll
was.
take a dab real quick. We'll play one
7
more.
of us, all aged 17 plus, in a van, and we had to hold hands. It was weird, but everyone was so scared we couldn't help it. After 20 minutes in the centre of the town, I had begun to see a figure in the distance. It seemed like the little girl everyone was talking about, but something was odd. It didn't look like the girl was walking. She was making these odd movements as if she was limping. I told everyone to look into the distance, and everyone said they saw her also. We watched, and after 3 to 5 seconds, the figure looked as if she were getting up. We realized she was crawling and had begun to stand up. Right when she stood up, the figure disappeared into the blackness, and a loud bang hit the driver's side.
He's face camping?
The
Yeah, he was
gravel
face
beneath
camping
the
that
van
whole entire match.
made sounds as if someone was crawling under the car, and 3 very distinct
What is with the
thumping
killer
noises
being
came
fucking
from under the
way
car.
overpowered now?
The
The
thumping
killer's literally
was
overpowered as
directly
shit.
below my feet,
All of them are.
and I could feel something hitting the car. Something also stepped onto the back bumper of the van, and a small thump could be heard hitting the back window. I made the decision that we should leave immediately, and so we did. We got to the gas station, everyone got out of the car, and we all saw it. On the driver's side mirror was a large fresh handprint. We were all freaked out. I made my way to the back of the car, and there was a little footprint on the back bumper, along with a set of handprints and fingerprints on the back window. But they just wouldn't come off the car. We sat at the gas station for 30 minutes after that, just freaking out, and the prints wouldn't dry. When you touched the prints, they wouldn't feel wet, but they'd look as if they were. Everyone was scared to go back in the van, but we eventually did, and we made sure not to drive the van directly to someone's house, because in our culture, something could have clung onto the van and tried to follow us home. So we went to a nearby Walmart. We stayed in the store for 45 minutes, came out, the prints were still there. So we had to call someone to get us and left the van in the parking lot until the next day. The prints eventually disappeared, and we took the van back to my cousin's
Oh, what
house.
happened?
We are never going to a ghost town again. This story happened to my sister-in-law 4 years ago. They are uber religious, and the state of her mental stability, on top of a finger found and a police follow-up, makes this story 100%
How do you know he's a
true
Twitch streamer,
and
Bonzi?
searchable. Last July, my sister-in-law Jackie was going back to Boise to visit for the weekend. Her husband lives in Provo and is going to law school there, as he's just graduated from a BYU chapter somewhere in southern Idaho. I'm not from Idaho, and I'm not Mormon, so I don't remember where it's located. Anyway, Jackie decided to drive from Provo, Utah, and head up to BYU to say hello to her friends just before coming back to Boise. The route she was on was I-15, which forks off into I-84 up to
damn.
Boise. After you pass through Salt Lake City, the route becomes lost in a plain rolling flat of miscellaneous desert dotted by farmland here and there. Jackie left Provo, Utah in the evening, as she planned on making dinner for her husband before her departure. She ended up leaving around 11 p.m. and given the late time, she decided to forego visiting her friends at the BYU chapter and headed along I-84 to come straight to Boise. She was in between Tremonton, Utah, and Burley, Idaho, in the literal middle of nowhere, where she drove up to what looked like a body lying in the road. The location is so desolate, there are no radio channels, cell phone services, or lights to be seen for hours. This 24-year-old girl was in the middle of the desert, in a green Dodge car that already had enough problems, so it's a miracle she made it home to us without issue to begin with. She arrived at my wife's parents' house,
Interesting.
but that was just the beginning of the
You
story.
play, you might as well call yourself
Here
Jerry.
is her account
True.
of what led to these events. At 2 a.m., she said she saw something lying on the road.
Jesus.
As she approached it,
What is up with
she
you
could
guys
see it was a
tonight?
body, lifeless, in the middle of
Call
nowhere.
yourself a Jerry.
It stretched across.
You call
both
yourself a
lanes,
Rick when in
and she could not
reaction,
simply
in
pass
actuality
without
you're a
running it
fucking
over.
Jerry.
Cautiously, she came to a stop and made sure she parked about 15 yards away and stopped. She opened the door and yelled, "Are you all right?"
Bonzi's a fucking
No response
menace.
could be heard.
Menace
With the
to
car lights
society.
broadcasting brightly on the body in the road, she got out of her car and slowly walked towards the person. As she got about 10 feet from the body in the road, she could see it was a dummy, fully dressed in human clothes, just lying there. Terrified, she sprinted back to her car, slammed on the door, and sped over the dummy. We received the cell phone call from her around Mountain Home, 45 minutes away from Boise. She was shaken and terribly scared, claiming she could hear footsteps chasing her to her car before she got in and drove off. We wrote it off as a freak accident, as we were all asleep and sounded too bizarre to worry of anything. As she pulled into the subdivision, she called us once again to help her unload the car and, probably, console given the bizarre experience. I opened the garage door and stood in the driveway with my wife,
We
waiting
ready?
for her to pull in. She came racing into the driveway and jumped out of the car, and this is where I lost it. As she opened the car door,
Face cam.
a
Trash,
finger
yeah,
print.
trash. You know, I've
not
noticed a lot of these
and
killers
drove
are just
straight to
fucking
us
garbage.
after
They
she
don't,
came
they
across
just,
the dummy.
they don't play the game
person
right.
who had placed the
They
dummy
face camp or
had
they play
chased
these
her back to her
one-shot
car,
fucking
and
characters.
as she
Like, my
slammed
god,
the door and
not even
sped off,
fun.
the person had reached out, losing
Not even a
finger in the
fun
slammed
game
door.
anymore.
We immediately called the police in the area, where she said she stopped at. The cops did a survey of all the hospitals in the area for a man missing a finger, and they found an exact match of his description. He was still in the hospital as he was arrested. The police did not give any details into the man's past or who he was, just simply told us to not worry about him, as he'd been arrested. I'm sure it's an anticlimactic ending to a terrifying scenario, but I will never forget the feeling that came over me when the finger fell out of her car door. I always drive with a firearm in my vehicle now.
Well, and plus they have
Anytime
perks like
I
no one
need to
escapes
travel.
death and all that kind of shit that just you can one shot at the end of the game too. So I mean,
A few
killers are
years
just too
ago,
fucking OP. I think
My friends and I went on a 45-mile, 3-night kayaking
a
trip
4-man survivor
down the
team,
Green River in Kentucky,
even with cons,
which runs
is
above
still
the
not as good
Mammoth
as
Cave
some of these
system.
killers.
the world's longest-known cave system, with more than 400 miles of surveyed passageways. We brought everything we needed in our kayaks and one canoe. Food, tents, water filtration, etc. And camped each night on the riverbank when it started getting dark, and we found level enough ground. The first night was uneventful, except to say that there is nothing like a wall of fireflies against a mountainous black tree line at night in the middle of nowhere. The second day, Around sunset, after a long day of kayaking and baking in the July heat, we came upon a stream in the bank that opened up into a large ravine. The streams, as we found out, was a cave spring pouring out blue, freezing cold water into a lagoon
Make a round for
about
us
30
to
feet
read.
wide, and so deep the blue water turned black.
Is it Michael
after a
Myers
few feet.
again? Guys, we're just playing against the
Had a
same
long,
character over and
sandy
over.
beach, secluded by hills on either side.
This is
and
the
a
third
tall,
time I played
overhanging
against a
cliff
fucking
behind and above us.
Michael
It was
Myers.
a beautiful, otherworldly place. Time moved very slowly there. We decided to camp there for the night. The sand was soft,
I
right,
fucked
and
up.
very fine. Ideal for ground sleeping. For some reason, the place deeply frightened me, but I didn't speak up. We were all tired, and everyone was having fun. We built a small fire and enjoyed the stars through the canopy of leaves for a while before everyone went to bed.
Is he gonna camp you?
I slept hard that night. At around 5 a.m. I woke up with a huge urge to relieve myself.
He's just gonna fucking camp
It's
you
still
too.
dark. I had the
I'm dumb.
tent door zipper about halfway open, and I had just popped my head out when I heard a loud and terrible roar slash
What a fucking
scream.
joke.
I immediately cowered
Again,
back
yeah.
into the tent and zipped it closed. I waited. The scream came from about 10 feet to the left, near the dwindling fire. It was high-pitched, but not like an owl's screech, though I'm not ruling that out. It was a wretched, pained scream that got lower pitched at the end. Being that we were in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, most likely it was a fox or boar or some kind of bird. Whatever it was, I lay awake for an hour. Listen. I heard absolutely nothing. Granted, we were on a soft beach, but I didn't hear a single twig snap or leaf crinkle when whatever it was finally shuffled away. It was bizarre. I should mention at this time that up the beach and off to the side of the lagoon was a small dry cave opening maybe 3 feet wide. I cannot say with any certainty that it was not some ancient cave-dwelling creature that surfaced to investigate our camp. I somehow fell back asleep and awoke the next morning shaken. I asked if any of my friends heard the terrible scream, but no one had, and we pressed on down the Green River. The third night at dusk, we came upon a large, rocky beach. We pulled our boats ashore and decided this would have to do, as we didn't want to go further down the river and risk being stuck on the water at dawn. This rocky beach was where the river split in two, and in the middle formed a collection of pale rocks, tall grass and dried out wood. A desolate pile of mud the size of a football field. A landmass was covered in jumping sand spiders and tiny frogs. Again, otherworldly. We set up camp, ate, and all went to bed around the same time. It was silent for 20 to 30 minutes.
Bro, I'm shitting on this
I'm
killer.
not
He didn't
sure.
even know what's up.
I was asleep, as the others were most likely as well. Suddenly my dream was interrupted by what sounded like a booming loud mechanical wooden beast. I awoke and shot straight up. It was truly the loudest thing I've ever heard. It sounded like a massive bulldozer tearing down a huge steel and wooden building. And then came a boom, followed by its echo throughout the river valley. The animals shifted, and the birds flew away. We were all awoken by the crash, and yelling in confusion at each other in our
Killer is
tents.
fucking
Nothing but
garbage.
silence followed outside our tents, and no one was particularly willing to shine a flashlight towards the woods. Eventually, we all decided it was just a falling tree, and went back to sleep. The next morning I thought about it a bit more. It didn't sound like just a tree falling. I must stress
My brother
it had a
in
metallic
Christ.
quality.
What are you
And
doing?
it was projected purposefully. It almost sounded like a roar. In the morning light, we found no evidence of anything out of the ordinary, nor any obviously fallen trees that could have made such a loud sound. So we packed up and headed out onto the river one last time to head home. My friends and I talk about that trip.
This killer doesn't
and all
like
the
breaking
weird things
pallets
that
very
happened.
much, which is a good thing.
We did the same kayak trip a few years later, and nothing out of the ordinary occurred. No mysterious forest noises, to both my disappointment and relief. This experience has bothered me for many years because I honestly don't know what to make of it. It has become one of those stories I tell around campfires, but this actually happened, and it still freaks me out when I think of it too much. I grew up on the east coast of Australia, and my family lived on a small country town on the edge of the rainforest. When I was 14, we rented a nice house on a few acres up a steep hill that ended in a cul-de-sac. The house was relatively nice, and sometimes I would go exploring the fire trails in the national forest behind
God damn
us.
it.
I never found or saw anything weird. I don't even remember seeing any animals there either for some reason. Anyway, there was a deep, heavily forested gully with a small creek on the north side of the house that I never explored. Because one night, when I was home by myself, I heard something really weird. It sounded like screaming, but it was a decent distance from our house, and it echoed through the gully. There were no other properties or houses between me and where the screaming seemed to be coming from, so I had no idea what was going on. It was eerie. I listened to it in the dark for a while,
Hell yeah.
and then I decided to go inside and lock all the doors. I didn't tell anyone about this, and probably would have forgotten about it if it hadn't reoccurred several years later. By the time I was 17, we had bought a property and built a house down in the valley across the creek, not very far from where we were renting a few years prior. It was a beautiful property that was skirted by a nice little creek with thick rainforest on three sides. I had kept up my habit of exploring the surrounding areas on foot, and in my 4WD, I knew it like the back of my hand. We had a large circular driveway that came down to the house, wrapped around a large beech tree, and connected back up with the road at the top of the property. The east side of the driveway had heavy bushland, and one night, or early morning around 2 a.m., I was coming home from my girlfriend's house, and my parents had left the front porch light on for me. I would always round the driveway and park the car on the east side incline, besides the bushland. As I was locking the door to the 4WD, just as I removed the key from the door, I heard it again, in the bushland, maybe 20 to 30 meters in front of me. But the bush was so thick, I couldn't have even seen a meter into the scrub. The light from the porch just lit up a dark wall of vegetation. It was in that moment I realized that every horrific scream I had heard prior to that moment in my life was not totally real. This one was different. It was real. And the difference chilled me to the bone. This person, it sounded like a woman, was being hurt brutally, and seemed as though their lungs would turn inside out from the agony. It sounded like they were trying to cry for help, but were in too much pain to make out any definite words. I stood there in shock for a moment, as I realized this scream was the same one I had heard years before, but this time closer. I went inside and woke up my parents, and we all stood on
Get
the
fucking
front porch
juked on,
and listened
dirty
for a
bitch!
few brief moments while we tried to decide what to do. My dad and I
Get
decided
none of
to
this.
investigate, and
Can't
my
touch
mom
this.
called the police, who would have been useless anyway because we were so far out in the middle of nowhere. The screaming stopped, but we knew exactly where it was coming from. I grabbed a large cane knife, the best weapon I had in a country that outlaws firearms, and my father grabbed our spotlight. We got into the 4WD and drove around the bushland, shining the spotlight in the area where we were sure the noise had been coming from. There was nothing. The police never came. But we drove around for about an hour, thinking maybe the source of the noise could have moved. But the scrub in that area was so thick, they wouldn't have been able to move very fast except on the fire trails we were using. And we covered those extensively in a short period of time on the 4WD.
Bonzi, let's get out of here. Don't worry about that guy.
A news report of a grisly death in our area,
Or should we grab him?
which would have been very uncharacteristic of our lazy little town. I thought there was no way of whatever was making that noise would have been able to not leave a huge mess for someone to find, but there was nothing. I told a few people about this experience, but Australians are no-nonsense kind of people and don't put much stock in the supernatural.
Well, time, bitch.
So everyone thought it was just wild pigs or an owl. I knew it wasn't either of those. My parents and I knew what we heard, and we were sure it was human.
You fucked!
And when I insisted that this noise was human, the person said, "Oh yeah, that's what everyone who hears it thinks." So I thought there might be a possible explanation, but only for my own sanity.
Get
As
poofed
far as I
off.
know, the noise was never heard again, and a few years later my parents and brother moved out of state, and I was living in the US for university and was sharing this experience with some kind of friends late one night. And the point that koalas mating was kind of a funny punchline. Except this time,
That was a pretty good one.
Who was obviously interested in the relations of marsupials said, "Have you ever looked up on YouTube to see if the sounds match up?" I hadn't. So we spent a bit of time looking up videos of koalas mating. There were quite
If
a
y'all
few,
want to play another one,
and
I'm
not
down for
video
another one, I
sounded
think.
close to what we heard. So back to square one, with no explanation. Anyone have any idea what this could possibly be? A few years back, my girlfriend at the time and I were on a week-long motorcycle trip during the summer, hotel hopping. We stopped in a major ski resort town, which is a complete ghost town during its off-season. For one of our
That was a lot of
stays,
fun. That was a really
because
good,
close
good
by,
match for me.
there were multiple hiking attractions, one of them being a major ski resort itself.
Fuck it, I'm
During
down
the
for
summer,
one more.
You can ride the lift to the top of the mountain, and from
He was
there
kinda trash
supposedly
for a
take
killer.
20-minute hike that overlooks the entire valley. We never got there. We arrive at this practically abandoned-looking ski lodge. Maybe had 6 cars in the parking lot, if that.
Last
No
one. This
was
is
there to
last
keep us
one.
as we
Last
walked
one
in.
though. I gotta go to bed. I'm
We kind
fucking
of
tired.
aimlessly walked around the lodge and finally
Last
hear
one,
someone
last one.
talking outside the chairlift.
The last of the
I approached
ones.
the guy and asked about this hike that was offered. He was a seemingly nice man, told us the directions once at the top to walk straight back where you get off at, and there's a trail that bends to the left
Nice.
and follow it for 15 to 20 minutes. It's an easy walk, and you see the whole valley at an overlook at the end. I gave him the $10 or whatever the cost was to ride the lift, and this is where it gets creepy. As we get to the top, the guy manning
Oh, are
the
we getting
console
festive?
steps out and gives us a friendly wave. Kind of a young, hefty guy. He stops the lift, and I immediately notice he must have had some severe social anxiety, or was very intimidated by me, as I'm 6'2", 250 pounds, tattooed and sleeveless, wearing my leather riding vest. I'm used to people avoiding interactions with me. After stopping the chairlift, the guy turns back to me and just loses all color in his face like he's looking at the devil himself. He's so nervous he could hardly open the safety bar, so I pop it off and we hop off. I ask him about the trail, and he manages to squeak out, "Over there." He points directly in front of us, and then he giggles. He giggled like a kid sneaking candy in the backseat
He
of a car.
giggled. He
As weird as
fucking
it
giggled.
was, I took it as nervous laughter, and out of curiosity
We're
for
doing
his
Fanny
instant
McGee.
change of
What they doing,
personality,
Fanny McGee? I
I
see a
dragged my
tail
feet
wagging.
around the lift house
Yeah,
and
you know I'm
taking the
talking to
view for a
you,
while,
huh?
trying to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
I ask him a few questions,
You
just being
sleeping?
friendly to show him that I mean him no harm. But
Ugh,
he never
Doug was
bites the
sleeping.
conversation and shoots back quick, short answers. We go onto the trail, hike for almost an hour, never seeing anything but woods, and we never made it to the outlet. It came to a clearing in a field surrounded with more trees and no more trail. A total bad vibe. We almost jogged back the way we came. We came out of the woods, and the same guy from earlier acts completely shocked we came back, almost like we weren't supposed to return. He asked us a bunch of questions about the trail, all while lightly giggling after each sentence. Then it seemed as if he was going to be in some sort of trouble and hurried us into the chairlift back down the mountain. I'm an
That's a
appetite.
definition of my
This
name. Is
trail only
goofy.
has one entrance and one exit,
I am
and we
very
walked it from
goofy.
end to end. And Giggle Monster
Especially when I
seemed
get tired.
surprised to hear we came back to a clearing like he's
Extra
never known
goofy.
about it. The guys at the bottom of the mountain acted just as surprised. Maybe the body van was running late. I don't know. But that place had a wrong turn vibe all over it.
A wrong turn vibe. Yeah. How we feeling?
Last year, I moved to rural Australia from the city to do some farm
I
work with my
moved
boyfriend.
to rural
He's from
Australia.
the UK, and to allow a second-year visa, he needed to complete 88 days on a farm. So I quit my job and went with him. We stayed in a
What?
working hostel.
What?
People worked in farms all around the area. We lived slightly out of town, close to the highway, and about 15 minutes from the beach. My boyfriend managed to get a job before I did, which meant a lot of boring days by myself at the hostel. It was early in the season, so
Hostel.
there weren't many backpackers yet. Anyway, one of the
Isn't that a
boring days I
brothel?
decided to maybe go to the
And
beach,
that's
so
why
I
it's
drove
named
into
brothel?
town. The town is surrounded by 3 beaches, like a square on the edge of the sea, if that makes sense. One of the beaches was a bit further away, and I hadn't been that many times, so I thought I'd check out the other one instead. It was the middle of the day, and this is a small town and there's no one else around. I pulled in the car park, and as I did, I noticed another car pull onto the car park too. It was a tradesman worker, with a company logo on the side. For some reason, I didn't get out of the car right away. I just had a funny feeling. I look over into the van about 2 car spaces distance between ours, and the guy looks at me and stares. He was an older man, I'd say mid-40s, and had a very blank expression. The feeling of uneasiness, I messaged my boyfriend, telling him I was at the beach just in case. While I'm doing this, van guy jumps out of his car and walks in front of my car along the path to the entry of the beach and heads down it. The path down to the beach is fenced to protect the sand dunes, so there's only one way in and out the beach area. I remember thinking it was weird he was walking down on the beach, as he was in jeans and a button-down shirt, and black shiny business shoes. Strange attire for a sandy beach in Australia in 35-degree heat. I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling, but I also could just be thinking the worst of this situation. Just to be safe, I thought I'd drive to one of the other beaches on the other side of town just to be sure. By this time,
I'm sorry,
van
Bonzi.
guy is out of sight, and presumably down
He's
on
about
the
to
other
touch my
beach.
butt.
So I pull out the car park and
He's
drive
gonna touch
over
my
to
butt.
one of the other beaches.
Oh, he touched my butt.
Now I have to explain the layout to give a little perspective. This other beach is on the complete other side of town. Not
Oh,
on the
shit.
road, and you really wouldn't
Why
want to
would
head
you
down
come
there
this
without
way?
looking nearby
Why did you
like an
choose
empty
this
beach.
way?
The entrance to the
Dumb.
car park
You're
is a
stupid.
small one-way road.
Dumb
It is
killer.
like an L shape with cars parked along it, and then an exit at the end. It's
Makes
a
no
small car
logical
park
sense
with
to
a
go that
street
way.
just over the other side, with only a few houses on it. So I pull into the empty car park my car in the first space, grab my beach bag, and as I'm about to get out of the car, I see a van in my rearview mirror. It pulls over quickly across from the street from the entrance to the car park. This time he doesn't get out. At this point I was too freaked out to get out the car. It just all seemed too weird, so I quickly drove home and stayed inside the rest of the day. I just couldn't shake that weird feeling. A lot of strange things happened in that town. It was like a pass-by town people traveled through a lot to get to major cities.
Oh, team, come on.
Yeah, this
We're not gonna
encounter
do
was
this
strange,
right now.
though. I never saw the man or his van again, but I didn't venture out on my own after that. I can't help but think what would have happened if I walked down on the beach path.
Oh yeah, you
Was he
really came
waiting
this
for
way?
me? The other thing is that he was at the other beach literally seconds after I was. So that would mean from where he was, he would have had to run up the beach pathway, get into his car to be there that fast. And why park right opposite the entrance? To see if I got out my car? These are the questions that have bothered me about this scenario. Do you think I'm paranoid? Or did he have any intentions? I guess we'll never know. My family and I have been hunting the same property in East Texas for over 10 years. And we've had some really creepy encounters with one of the locals. The property we hunt on is Timber Company.
Why did I not do it? Why did I
Way
not
off
do a
the beaten
360?
path down some dirt roads. No power, no running water, no sewer. There are very few people that live in the area. Only a few scattered hunting camps and some locals. Our closest
What's going on
neighbors
is we're all getting
live
too
in a
clumped up.
trailer
We need
about
to
a mile away.
get away
We've
from
come
each
to
other.
The Meth House. Now, I'm
And
not
one
sure
of us
if there
needs to
really
be a
is
threat.
anything
One of us needs to go to a
going on
gen.
there, but it would be hard to believe there isn't.
2 gens.
This place has always been. There is a trailer sitting in the middle of a
Oh my god.
you
You guys. I'm not any better than you guys, I promise.
There have always been broken down cars and other junk.
This killer, unlike any other of the other ones, just breaks the fucking pallets.
Hip bones are attached to a pine tree in front of the house, going up about 15 to 20 feet. It started out with maybe 10.
Oh shit, he's got the stronger pallet drop.
20. For a long time, I thought that was the oddest thing about the place.
I fucking suck at this game, I'm fucking
2017,
bad.
things started
Holy
to get weird.
shit almighty.
The front yard collection began to grow. A rotted out taxidermy of a wild hog was added to the skull tree.
That is the end of Wakanda.
With horns and some kind of gown mounted on a stick by the side.
Wakanda for never.
That we called the baby devil. Tripods
He actually just
standing about
destroyed
12
me.
feet high. Each were erected around the trailer made out of young pine tree trunks. One day we
When
drove
did you start
by
running borrowed
and
time?
noticed that from these tripods hung the spinal column and rib cages of some animals.
Oh no, I didn't click
We originally thought
spectate!
that maybe they were using the tripods to hang and clean deer, but the same bones hung for over a year, and someone would usually want to dispose of the leftover carcass, because the smell can get overwhelmingly fierce very quickly. So, we had no encounters with the residents, and weren't even sure what they looked like. The place was creepy, but they kept to themselves.
Anyway,
until later
that
in
was
the
my
season,
last one anyway.
where we had
Sorry I
two
fucking forgot to
separate
hit the
creepy
spectate
encounters.
button.
The first happened to a
But
good
hey,
friend.
I hope everyone
He'd
has
made
a
quick
great
day
night.
trip with his wife up
And
to
I'm
the
gonna
property
go,
to
let's...
fill feeders and ride four-wheelers. To get to his spot, he had to go on the dirt road and drive right past the meth house. His spot is only a few hundred yards away from the house. While they were doing their thing, they began to hear some strange noises. As he listened closer, he could hear fast, high-pitched gibberish back and forth between two voices. He described it as a lot of yips, yas, and yees.
Alright, team. That's it for me. Go ahead and just sign off. With what song, though? Anyways, we'll be playing some Valorant tomorrow, I believe, with Marcus, if he gets up and add him on time. If not, probably just playing ranked or whatever. But I need to go and sleep, as all of you guys should. I hope you guys all have a great night. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Down from the door where it began, and I must follow if I can. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can. Down from the door where it began, and I must follow if I